What's up, beautiful people? In this Jocz Productions video, we're taking a look at the American Revolution. We are finally becoming America. And in this video, I'm going to explain the various factors that contributed to the American victory. First thing you need to keep in mind, this was not a short war. It would be over 7 years of fighting. And Great Britain had overwhelming military and financial advantages. At first glance, there is no reason the colonies should come out of this war victorious. If we were to do the weigh-in, Britain looks like it's gonna whoop the colonist bums. I think bum is how you say butt in British. Britain had a highly trained and well-supplied military. Britain had the best navy in the world, the best manufacturing, able to supply their army, and they had cool accents.
You sound like you're from London.
The colonists also had numerous disadvantages. They had no unified government. Eventually they will come up with the Articles of Confederation, but we will find out in another video that's gonna have all sorts of problems. The colonists also had a lack of money, no trained military, and no manufacturing capabilities. And the colonists also had a divided population. It's going to be very hard to get the colonists to fight for this national cause when colonists identified by their region. I'm a Virginian, I'm a Pennsylvanian, I'm a Delawarean. This divided population during the American Revolution is important. Yes, there was no national survey, somebody knocking on the doors to see how each colonist felt about the war, but it roughly broke down like this. About 20% of the colonists were loyalists. That means they wanted to remain with the British. About another 40% of the colonial population was neutral. They don't really care who won. So not only do you have the conflict of the colonists versus mama country Britain, but you also have a conflict between patriots and loyalists. And the loyalists are going to undermine the patriot struggle from within. There were thousands of loyalists who fought for the British military. Nevertheless, despite considerable loyalist opposition, as well as all of these other challenges, throughout history, we will learn that being the underdog doesn't necessarily mean you are going to lose. Remember, the colonists were fighting to become Americans, not Americans. And there are various reasons why the Patriot cause ended up succeeding. For example, one thing the colonists had going for them was home field advantage. Britain had to deal with super long supply lines. Yes, they have the manufacturing and well-trained soldiers, but they were faced with the logistical challenges of how to communicate, supply troops, and remain flexible in their wartime strategy, being thousands of miles from the scene of the fighting. The colonists, on the other hand, are fighting on their own turf. They know the terrain and can strategize accordingly. Another positive for the colonists is that they had the will to fight. The colonists believed they were fighting the righteous fight. We've seen the ideological arguments that were made in documents such as Common Sense and the Declaration of Independence, whether it be individuals who were committing treason when they signed their names to the Declaration of Independence, or the actual individuals fighting in the Continental Army who were actually fighting for their lives. The colonists had an ideological commitment and resilience that the British could not match. Another important reason for the eventual Patriot victory is the military leadership of people like George Washington. As commander of the Continental Army, Washington kept the colonial cause going even during low points in this long war. An example of this was when the day after Christmas, and G-Dub organized a surprise attack against the German mercenaries that Britain used during the American Revolution. And while many of the battles of the American Revolution will be fought using conventional military tactics, the colonists will also use guerrilla warfare to help achieve some victories. Since the colonists knew the land, but were less experienced and often short on supplies, they would use hit-and-run tactics and would choose the battles they engaged in carefully. One major advantage for the colonists was the fact that they could win the war without actually beating the British military. As long as they kept the war going for as long as possible, the thought was the British would eventually pack up and go home. Colonists just had to try not to lose too badly too soon. And perhaps one of the most important reasons the colonists will be victorious was due to assistance by European allies. Early on, Ben Franklin tried to get the French to openly support the colonial cause. Initially, it did not look like it was going to happen since the colonists did not seem like they had any shot of pulling off the victory. But apparently Ben Franklin did have his head tickled by a French girl with a feather while trying to get this alliance going. As mentioned, France was reluctant to openly support the colonists because nobody wants to side with the loser. And before we leave this image, there is so much to unpack right here. Hit pause and go at it. But following the colonial victory at the Battle of Saratoga in 1777, it became clear the colonists might be able to pull this thing off and possibly defeat the British. Shortly after the Battle of Saratoga, the the Franco-American alliance was signed, thereby providing open French financial and military assistance to the colonists. Helping the colonists against Britain was a way for France to send a gut punch to their European rivals by weakening the British Empire. So it's some nice revenge for getting kicked out of North America in 1763 by Britain. Ultimately, the Battle of Yorktown in 1781 would be the last major battle of the American Revolution. Even at this final battle, the French Navy will lend an assist in helping the colonists beat the British at Yorktown. The Treaty of Paris in 1783 would eventually recognize the 13 colonies as an independent nation. The boundary of the independent U.S. would extend west until the Mississippi River. Also in the treaty, the British were to remove troops and forts from the Northwest region you see right there. This would be a source of conflict later on. Foreshadowing. And also in the treaty, the U.S. was supposed to pay loyalists for lost property, something else that would not happen as planned. And in our next video, I'm going to be looking at the impact, both global and domestic. That's going to do it for today. Thank you so much for watching. Have a beautiful day. Peace.